Here are the stories shaping the world this morning and why they matter. In Washington, the U.S. Senate has delivered its sharpest rebuke so far to President Donald Trump's handling of the war with Iran. Senators approved a non-binding war powers resolution directing the president to seek congressional authorization before continuing hostilities. The vote was 50-48, with 4 Republican senators joining Democrats in support. The House of Representatives passed the same resolution on June 3rd, making this a coordinated, if largely symbolic, push from Capitol Hill to reassert its constitutional role over war powers. Supporters say the measure is about democratic accountability, not party politics. Whether decisions that can put American service members in danger, disrupt families, and widen conflict should be made by one president alone. The resolution does not force an immediate change in military policy, but it adds public pressure at a sensitive moment. U.S. and Iranian leaders remain at odds over nuclear inspectors. Tehran says inspectors will not get access, while Trump says they will be on the ground at the appropriate time. The dispute leaves soldiers, diplomats, and families across the region waiting for clarity, as lawmakers try to draw firmer lines around presidential authority. A rare and deadly Ebola strain is spreading in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and France has now recorded its first official case tied to the outbreak. The patient is a doctor who returned from a humanitarian mission in the DRC. In Congo, confirmed cases are close to 100 partners, with almost 300 deaths reported. Health workers are facing the immediate challenge of treating patients while also keeping essential services open for people who need care for other reasons. In Bunia, one of the outbreak's epicenters, fear of infection is already changing daily life. Pregnant women are avoiding prenatal appointments even when they need regular checkups. Esther Lotola, who is 26, said she stopped going to prenatal visits until the outbreak is over. She also skipped a relative's funeral because it involved a suspected Ebola case. Those choices show how an epidemic can harm people beyond the official case count. When families fear clinics, routine care suffers. When funerals become dangerous, grief becomes even more isolating. The strain is being described as rare and deadly, with no vaccine and no approved treatment cited in the reports. That puts extra pressure on public health teams, contact tracers, local clinics, and international partners to contain the outbreak while maintaining trust. In Japan, southwestern Kyushu is facing dangerous rain from a stationary rain front, with authorities warning of landslides, flooding, and possible tornadoes. Parts of Kagoshima Prefecture received more than 100 millimeters of rain in a single hour on Wednesday morning. Officials issued a Level 4 urgent landslide warning, the second highest level, for parts of Kagoshima. Goto recorded 312.5 millimeters of rain in 24 hours, while Taga in Shikoku recorded 152.5 millimeters over the same period. Some areas could receive another 200 to 250 millimeters in the next 24 hours. For families, that can mean deciding whether to leave home before roads flood or slopes begin to fail. For older residents and people with disabilities, evacuations can be especially difficult. Emergency workers are urging caution because heavy rain can turn small streams into fast-moving hazards and can weaken hillsides long after the worst downpour passes. The threat is not limited to Kyushu. Heavy rainfall may also affect western and central Japan. Okinawa is preparing for strong typhoon Mikala, while Typhoon Higos is expected to move into waters south of Japan on Friday. Local authorities are focused on early warnings, shelters, and transportation disruptions as communities try to reduce risk before conditions worsen. A political dispute between Ukraine and Poland has deepened after President Volodymyr Zelensky named a Ukrainian military unit after the Ukrainian Insurgent Army, known as the UPA. The UPA was active during and after the Second World War. In Ukraine, many see it as part of the struggle for statehood. In Poland, it is blamed for massacres of tens of thousands of civilians during World War II. That history remains raw for many Polish families, and the latest decision has created a serious diplomatic strain at a time when Ukraine depends heavily on European support. Poland's President Karol Nawrocki stripped Zelensky of the Order of the White Eagle, one of Poland's highest honors. Zelensky posted images on social media showing the medal being returned, and he called off a planned visit to a Ukrainian reconstruction conference in Gdansk. The dispute matters beyond symbolism. Poland has been a major hub for aid, refugees, and logistics since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Ukrainian families rebuilding lives in Poland, Polish communities hosting them, and workers involved in reconstruction all have an interest in keeping cooperation stable. The challenge for both governments is to acknowledge painful history while preserving practical support for Ukraine's defense and recovery. France is dealing with a dangerous heatwave that has already been linked to nearly 40 drowning deaths within the past week, most of them among young people. As temperatures rise, people have been seeking relief in rivers, canals, and unofficial swimming spots, where currents, whirlpools, and sudden drops can be deadly. Near Lyon, a 21-year-old promising footballer was rescued from a water body used as a makeshift beach, but was left brain dead. Residents there have described strong currents and whirlpools. The French government is warning people not to treat any open water as safe simply because it is accessible. Paris authorities have authorized swimming in one stretch of the Canal Saint-Martin, an effort to give residents a safer legal option during extreme heat. But jumping from footbridges remains forbidden, and officials say some people are still breaking the rules. France's National Weather Service issued a red heatwave alert for more than half the country, with extreme temperatures expected to continue until the end of the week. The heat has also affected infrastructure. About 68,000 households in northwestern France lost electricity in the first major power outage linked to the heatwave. For families, workers, and older people without reliable cooling, the crisis is a reminder that climate adaptation means more than warnings. It means safe public spaces, resilient power systems, and practical protections for people who cannot simply stay indoors. U.S. authorities have announced additional sanctions on the Prince Group, a Cambodia-based multinational conglomerate they describe as one of Asia's largest criminal enterprises. The Treasury Department announced the measures on Tuesday, sanctioning 9 individuals and 26 entities linked to the group. Their assets in the United States are now frozen. U.S. authorities accuse the group of large-scale online fraud and money laundering. Officials say scam operations based in Southeast Asia targeted Americans and cost them more than $10 billion in 2024, a 66% increase from the previous year. Those losses are not abstract. They can mean retirees losing savings, families falling into debt, and workers spending years trying to recover from identity theft or financial manipulation. The United States also sanctioned the group last year in coordination with the United Kingdom. The latest action follows other law enforcement moves in the region. Tokyo police arrested a man believed to be a senior member of the group on suspicion of falsifying residence documents. Prince Group chairman Chen Ji was arrested by Cambodian authorities and extradited to China in January. The case highlights a growing international challenge. Online fraud networks that operate across borders, move money quickly, and often exploit vulnerable workers as well as victims. Sanctions alone may not end the problem, but they can make it harder for criminal networks to use formal financial systems. Malaysia is drawing new attention as a possible rare earth supply chain hub in an industry still dominated by China. Rare earth elements are essential for high-performance magnets used in advanced manufacturing, energy technology, and defense-related equipment. Japan has invested in a Malaysian refinery that processes Australian ore, seeing it as part of a broader effort to secure alternative supplies. A senior official from Japan's Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry visited the refinery in late March. The Japanese government and a major trading house provided financing worth about $270 million at current rates. The plant refines Australian ore in Malaysia, and production of samarium and dysprosium began last year. Both elements are used in high-performance magnets. For Japan, stable deliveries are an urgent priority because disruptions can affect factories, export industries, and workers far from the mine or refinery. For Malaysia, the opportunity could bring investment and skilled jobs, but it also raises questions about environmental safeguards, local oversight, and whether communities benefit fairly from the industry. Malaysia also has potential as a source of raw rare earths. Governments are increasingly treating supply chains as a matter of economic resilience, not just trade. The constructive challenge is to diversify supply without repeating older patterns of pollution, weak labor protections, or extractive development. Ukraine says its forces struck a railway bridge, a power plant, and other key infrastructure sites in Russian-held Crimea on Tuesday. Kyiv has stepped up efforts to isolate the Black Sea Peninsula, now in the latest phase of a war that has lasted 4 years. Crimea remains central to Russia's military position in the south, serving as a logistics hub and symbol of control. By targeting infrastructure, Ukraine is trying to make it harder for Russian forces to move supplies, fuel, and equipment. Authorities on the peninsula have already been forced to halt gasoline sales to civilians, a sign that military pressure is reaching ordinary life. For civilians in Crimea, infrastructure attacks can mean shortages, uncertainty, and a shrinking space between military targets and daily needs. For Ukrainians living under Russian occupation, the situation is even more complex. Any disruption may weaken Russia's hold, but it can also make basic services harder to access. Kyiv has framed the campaign as part of its effort to reclaim occupied territory and reduce Russia's ability to wage war. The development comes as both sides continue to rely on drones, long-range strikes, and pressure on supply lines, rather than any quick diplomatic breakthrough. The human stakes remain high for families divided by front lines and for communities waiting for safety, power, fuel, and a path toward recovery. U.S. officials are describing a pilot project in southern Lebanon, under which Israeli troops would hand over control of some territory to the Lebanese armed forces. Lebanese troops involved in the arrangement would receive U.S. training and vetting. The vetting is intended to ensure they are not linked to Hezbollah. Israel would still maintain a military presence in the buffer zone. The plan reflects a careful and limited attempt to reduce tensions along a volatile border without asking either side to make a sweeping immediate concession. For people living in southern Lebanon and northern Israel, the practical question is whether such arrangements can make daily life safer, whether children can return to school, farmers can reach land, and displaced families can go home. The Lebanese state has long faced the challenge of asserting authority in areas where Hezbollah has deep influence. Israel, meanwhile, says it needs security guarantees before reducing its presence. The United States is trying to position the Lebanese armed forces as a more credible local security actor. That approach may offer a pathway to lower tensions, but it also depends on trust, monitoring, and whether communities see the plan as security rather than another layer of outside control. At this stage, officials are presenting it as a pilot, not a final settlement. Japan says 2 of its citizens were detained in northeastern China last month on suspicion of smuggling prohibited items. Chief Cabinet Secretary Kihara Minoru said Chinese customs authorities took the 2 into custody in Dalian. He declined to provide further details, citing privacy concerns. Japan says neither detainee is suffering from health problems. China confirmed the detentions through a foreign ministry spokesperson, saying the 2 were taken into custody in accordance with Chinese law. Beijing said it has provided Japan with details of the cases and urged Japanese nationals and businesses in China to follow Chinese laws and regulations. The case comes at a time when many companies and travelers are already cautious about legal risks in China, especially in industries where export controls, customs rules, and national security concerns can overlap. For the detainees' families, the immediate concern is access to consular support, legal information, and health updates. For Japanese businesses, the case is another reminder that employees working abroad need clear guidance on what can and cannot be transported, even in routine travel. Tokyo is likely to monitor the cases closely while avoiding public statements that could make quiet diplomacy harder. The incident adds another point of tension to a relationship where trade, security, and public trust are often moving in different directions. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has begun a 3-day Middle East tour, with visits to key Gulf Arab allies expected in the coming days. The trip is aimed at reassuring U.S. partners in the region who are uneasy about elements of President Donald Trump's proposed U.S.-Iran deal. It comes amid a broader flurry of Iran-related diplomacy, as Washington tries to manage conflict, nuclear concerns, and regional alliances at the same time. Gulf governments have long worried that a deal between Washington and Tehran could leave their security concerns under-addressed, especially if it focuses narrowly on nuclear issues while leaving missile programs, proxy groups, or regional influence unresolved. For ordinary people in the Gulf, Iran, Israel, Lebanon, Iraq, and beyond, diplomacy is not just a matter of elite meetings. It can affect fuel prices, jobs, migration, shipping routes, and the risk of escalation. Rubio's task is to convince partners that U.S. diplomacy with Iran does not mean abandoning them. A measured diplomatic push can be constructive if it reduces the chance of war and creates space for inspectors, de-escalation, and regional communication. But reassurance will require details, not just promises, particularly as the Senate in Washington is also pressing for more congressional oversight of any continued hostilities with Iran. In Germany, Deutsche Bahn has resumed train service after a failure in the GSM-R digital radio system left trains and passengers stranded. The network operator said the disruption was triggered when workers swapped out a component. GSM-R is a digital radio system used for rail communication, and when it fails, trains can be delayed or halted for safety reasons. For passengers, the outage meant missed work, disrupted childcare plans, lost appointments, and uncertainty about when journeys could continue. For rail workers, it meant managing safety procedures, passenger information, and a sudden operational breakdown across a busy system. Germany depends heavily on rail for commuting and long-distance travel, and disruptions can ripple quickly through the economy. The explanation from the network operator suggests the outage was not caused by a wider attack or natural disaster, but by a technical failure during maintenance. That matters because it points to a fixable problem. Better safeguards, testing, backup systems, and communication when critical components are changed. As service resumes, the focus shifts to accountability and prevention. Reliable public transport is not only a convenience. It is part of how workers reach jobs, students reach schools, and families stay connected without depending entirely on cars. Follow for a daily world brief. Sources are linked in the description. That's the world, as Minerva saw it.